All right, I think we're ready to take a look at a couple key concepts of Chapter 7, and that's really kind of starting to take a look at some of the validation controls that we haven't used in the past. I'm not going to go through and give you everything that you need, but definitely want to touch on a couple of the main ones and then let you go from there. So the first thing that we're going to do is one of the new ones that we're going to drop in is we're going to utilize one called a validation summary. I'm going to drop this validation summary right up at the top here. When you take a look at the validation summary, you notice that it has the error message 1, error message 2. This is where whatever we use for validators, the error message will pop up in this area. So if I come and I take a look, right, I have some different properties here. Validation summary, I could change its CSS class, so we like that text danger because that makes it red. How's it going to display? So I have a bulleted list, single paragraph, leave it as a bulleted list. Enable client script, enabled show message box. Right now message box is false. Message box would be a pop-up. Show summary would be this area right here. So as we begin taking a look at utilizing those pieces, you know, that's something that we need to think about, like how do we want it to appear to the user. So we've done required field validators before, so I'm going to go ahead and drag a required field validator in right next to my arrival date. And it kind of jumps down to the bottom because of the bootstrap and how it's stretching across, but we're going to fix that here as we go. So remember, when we start talking about any of these validators, there's a couple things that we always change. The first one is the control to validate, so I'm going to go ahead and pick my arrival date. My CSS class, I'm going to go ahead and use the text danger, right? That's what makes it turn red. Display static, or we can also do dynamic. We're going to leave it at static right now. The error message, we've done this in the past, but we're going to say arrival date is required. And you notice it changes it right now. What's going to happen is whatever we put in that error message is what's going to pop up at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this real quick just so we can take a look. So it pops up my page, and by default there's something in there. But you notice it says arrival date is required, so it put the little error message right there. I'm going to change this. I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And there's another field that we haven't used before, which is the text property. For the text property, I'm just going to put an asterisk. And you notice now my message changes to where it's just an asterisk. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this real quick. It pops in. I clear that out, and you notice now I get a little asterisk next to it. Not probably the best location, right? So I would probably move that over by my arrival date. But now, like, that doesn't really tell anybody anything. But if I come down here and I submit it, now you notice whatever I had inside my error message shows up here. So let's say we want to move this next to the arrival date, like that. Run it now. Delete this. Go to my next one. Now all of a sudden you see that I have the red asterisk there. Doesn't really tell the user anything until I go and I hit submit. If I come out here, I'm going to come onto my validation summary, and where it says show message box, I'm going to go ahead and turn that on to true. So you can have message box and summary, you can have one or the other, but just to kind of show you the difference here. Oh, didn't mean to do that there, so let's launch it again. Come down, clear that out, hit submit. There's my box that shows up, and then there's my summary. So just so you kind of have an idea of the different things that go into those locations. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to add in required field validators to everything that it says inside the area. A couple other things to just hit on, and I noticed this just when I was kind of playing around with it. I went to do my NuGet packages, and when I first came in here, it said there was 4 updates. And this time and the first time I updated them, I actually ran into some issues. So what I decided to do is not to update them. And instead what I did is I came over and I installed the script manager, right? So I did the script manager. So I installed the script manager, which is already, it shows that it's already installed. So I just installed that. When I installed that, it updated my Bootstrap and my JS, but it did not update these other 2 objects, these 2 compilers, which I think is what's causing us some issues. So I just left those as saying like don't update those 2. So you'll want to install the script manager. Now when you install the script manager, it is going to update your JS and your Bootstrap. The only thing you have to do is change this right here. Here's going to say 191. Change it to 311. Everything will work fine. There's some things you can run into, so just really be careful with it as you begin going through. So I know in one of the steps inside the assignment, it tells you to update the NuGet package. It does tell you like don't forget to do the changing of where it's going from. Run it, make sure there's no errors. If you accidentally update that other piece, you might run into some issues. One of the things I do is I keep like a zip file of the last thing I did, so then if I break it, I can always just like delete the thing that's on my page on my computer and then relaunch my zip file, and then I should be good to go. So we have those different areas in there, and so the next big one is basically our compare validator, right? Because required field validators are pretty easy to come up with. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to look for my validation, and I'm going to pull over a compare validator next to my departure date. I'm not saying that's where you're going to put it at and everything else. I just want to kind of drop them in and show you the different things that go into it. So with a compare validator, you have to give it all the same stuff: CSS class, error message, all that jazz. But the big one first is control to validate, right? The control you're validating is the txt departure date. Now, if you look right above it, there's a control to compare to, and so I'm going to compare it to my arrival date. So I have to make sure I put those 2 things in there. And so now it knows to look at this one and compare it to this other one. So if we come down here, value to compare, right? So I'm going to come in there and I'm going to say it has to be greater than, right? So it says value to compare against, or not, nope, I did it in the wrong spot. Operator, right? So my operator is going to be, I need to make sure it's, let's say, greater than, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and launch this. And there's all the other features, right? I need to change the CSS class. I need to change my error message. I need to change all those things. So if I come in here and I say, nope, I want this to be to 09/2017, right? I come down here and submit. I get my compare validator error because this is not greater than this. Now if I come back in here and I change this to the 11th, right? I can come in, I can hit submit, and now I don't get that error. So that's your compare validator. Pretty easy to put in place there. Same thing, you're going to change your CSS class, you're going to change your error message, you're going to change your, here's one thing you can do, is if you have an error message, right? So I could say, departure must be greater than arrival. And then if I come down here and in my text, I just put an empty space. It should be. Let's go. So I'd put an asterisk there, right? Because you don't want that big chunk there. you just want it to pop up. So the hard part is that it's kind of up to you. Like, do you asterisk it? Do you, if you don't put anything there, right, it goes in there. So there's your operator, error message, control to validate, all those things. I want to try something here. Nope. So there's no way to take that out, so you either have to use an asterisk or something else. So there's your control validator. The next thing that you have to put in there, and this is pretty simple, is your regular expression validators, right? So I'm going to pull this regular expression over, and I'm going to drop it in next to my email address. Same thing, need to make sure I change the control to validate. So this would be on my email, and I would change my error message, I would change my CSS class, but then the big one is validation expression. So I go and check that, and there's a whole bunch of them. So if you remember last semester, we actually went and we typed in all those things, and we had slants and square braces, and I said, I'm not very good at them because it does it for me. So here I could just say internet email address. It's going to show you what the validation is, so if you want to tweak it a little bit, you can. Let me go ahead and say OK. I'm going to go ahead and launch this. Now a couple things happen though. Because we have that as a type mode email, if I start typing here and I go away, there it popped up, right, saying it has to look like an email address. And there it goes away, right? So the submit throws the validation summary. The real time will just show it as it goes. So if we were doing a phone number or any of the other things like that, that would be our way in our method of doing that. So I think that gets pretty much most of chapter 7 in line. I know I have some slides out there for you, but there's the only other one that we didn't really talk about is the custom validator. So your custom validator actually allows you to write the C# code to check something else, right? So if you wanted to say that your compare had to be at least 5 days out, you would write that inside that custom validator. Same thing with like a lot of the controls, right? They have the same properties that we're going to change and that we're going to put in place. So that follows pretty much the same on all of them. The regular expression, if you actually check on page 261 of the book, it shows some examples of some regular expressions, and it shows you what some of those elements do. Like if I have a \d that matches any decimal digit. And so those are always some good things to kind of take a look at. We could always, the display mode, I had it set to, well, there's the header text that you can change, the show summary. Those are all in those validation control, the validation summary. So it really kind of is pretty simple. Like I said, there's not much to this chapter. We've already kind of done validation controls and things like that. So with that, I think you should have enough to do chapter 7, and then on Wednesday we will start up with chapter 8.